Hey everybody, welcome back to the Mildly Competitive Podcast. Today we have a four-man crew. We've got myself, Eric, we've got Casey, Dyson, and DJ.
So,
How's everybody going?
Yo,
Hey,
yo, yo.
what's going on?
All right. Today we have just a couple topics we wanted to go over. We have some event recaps. We had not only our own challenge, but a lot of our team went to travel to two other challenges over this past week. So that was three events, and we've got a couple people here who did pretty well. We have the store review because we did travel from DJ. And then we kind of wanted to talk about a topic of data collection, kind of how we can get like lists or what we can learn from playing said lists, where we can look to kind of see the future, things like that. To start off, we're going to go with our event recap. So at our home store, E4 Cards and More, over here in Bend, we had our challenge. We had, how many people did it end up being? Was it 14, if I recall correctly?
14 or 18, I think?
Either 14 or 18.
18 sounds right. Total.
One of those numbers, one of the bigger numbers. And that event, I played, as always, Arceus Duraludon, Umbreon. Ended up going 2-2, got a bit tilted in one of the games. And the last game I played against Birds, which is normally a better matchup. But he was running some interesting tech that ended up getting me, and I couldn't quite pull it together, so I ended up losing that. So that was a little unfortunate, but overall, not terrible. I feel like this deck is probably not going to be very good going forward into this format. It has I don't know how you deal with Charizard, or if you even care about dealing with Charizard, but 330 is a lot. And other decks are just getting more powerful, so it's just getting a little... I feel like it's getting a little outpaced, but we'll see going forward.
I feel like by the fact you said that, you've now jinxed your... Like the next large event is going to be won by Arctura.
I mean, in the right meta, if you can hit the right decks, like if you can avoid anything with Giratina, which is a nightmare for the deck, you kind of have a field day, especially against Lost Box and Gardevoir is a pretty good matchup. Which are two of the other big decks. So if you can like make that magical run, I think the deck can do really well. But I think it has a hard time against Charizard. I still need to get more games with that. And like, there's some random fringe decks that give it a problem. And then with Giratina being as popular as it is going forward, especially in this new format where you want to be one-shotting a lot of the Charizards, that hurts this deck as well. So the trick is just to be lucky.
Never lucky.
Never.
Yeah, so this weekend I did compete just on our local one, E4. I ended up playing Turbo Lost Box.
Boo!
Traitor!
Yeah. I ended up going 1-3.
That's what you get.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
Only went to Ting Lu, but, losing to two of our fellow podcast members, Dyson and Trenton, in the mirror match, and Dyson running his Tina variant, and just ended up getting rolled, and now the deck's retired.
Do you think it was player skill or the deck just running kind of wonky in a best of one format?
No. I mean, all my matchups were close.
Okay.
I lost to the Tina variant, Giratina Lost Box, but my opponent opened up VIP pass and I didn't, so that made a big difference.
Yeah, good old best of one magic.
Yeah, and even decided got it back, but they were able to knock out my Manaphy and set up a Greninja play to finish out the game. And I did set it up to where Greninja got 4 prize cards, and I was set up to win the following turn, but ended up not playing a hand disruption card. Typically there's a slot for like either Iona or Roxanne, and at that point my opponent had all the cards in their hand. So, and then losing to Trenton mirror match, he was able to go first and get a Manaphy established.
He's also been on the deck for like a hot minute, so
Still
he
is.
definitely is that
Yeah,
matchup knowledge.
yeah, yeah. We both in the matchup pretty well. I missed Manaphy benching, and so
Oh, womp.
Oof.
he was able to start out double knocking out with Greninja, and I was able to see 7 cards, but no way to bench another card, and just got my um, Lone Greninja knocked out by his Raikou. So that was game, and then yeah, that was my event. But learned a lot, and probably on the Charizard train going forward.
So I ended up playing Guardy again. It's the only deck I really have built. And I ended up taking first, technically, in the event. Um, I played against uh, the what were matchups? I played against Ting Lu, which was close, but I always round one against this guy with Ting Lu. Then I did um, Arc. What was it? Arc Agron. It was like Arc
Oh,
Umbreon
Arceus Aggron.
Yeah. Um, which was very interesting. That one was also pretty close. There was a bit of a misplay in one of the matchups, or in one of the turns that led me to be able to take the win. But that one was pretty close. Third round was against Eric, who was playing Arctura. And this one was a bit of a tilt. He started off with Alakazam, and I had a pretty good start. And this was one of the games where I feel like I leveraged the best of one versus best of three mindset, where I went what I'm calling goblin mode. And I chose to get very greedy on turn 2 because I had established 3 routes. I had 3 Curlias in hand, but I really wanted to set up a Gardevoir EX so I could accelerate my Zacian to knock out his Umbreon. Or was that an Umbreon or an Arce? I think
It was Umbreon.
it was Umbreon. I wanted to knock out the Umbreon that turn. Unfortunately, I had to Iono, so I couldn't boss it up. But I was able to, with Iono, 2 of the refinements, plus Greninja, and then like an Ultra Ball, and doing enough digging, get the Gardevoir EX into play. And if Daniel was here, he would agree. It was a very goblin-brained play. But I got it, and I'm pretty sure that's what cinched the matchup for me, was being able to set that up, establish, and then next turn I could boss up the Umbreon, knock it out. So that was a pretty good one in my favor. There's a couple turns maybe it could have changed either way. I know there were some pretty important discard and resource losses on Eric's side early on. And then last round was actually against a Meowscarada deck, Arc Meowscarada with Bidoof Dry Engine, and we technically took a draw, and so his opponent's win percentages were higher, so he technically got first. We played that for fun, and I won. And that one wasn't particularly close. I was able to establish pretty quickly a Gardevoir EX. I just started knocking out his Spaghettitos, Spaghettitos, and he just really couldn't get anything set up. So pretty decent weekend. Got some more points. Took second in the event, but technically first. Had some heaters for prize packs. Like some switches. I got a switch card. I got a Mirage Gate. I got a Manaphy. I got a Arceus V-Star. Pretty good ones. But that was my event this weekend.
I had a 3-day event. On Friday, I played Miraidon. I went 3-1 with that. For my first round, I took a loss to Trenton, playing a Lost Box variant. So that was unfortunate. And I went 3-1, bubbled out of top 4, got 5th.
Womp.
Which was kind of interesting because in the beginning, the lady, we had enough players to have 5 rounds. We originally had 5 rounds, but people kept dropping later on, and then the Pokemon randomizer generator pairings thing wouldn't let her start up that 5th round.
Interesting.
Because of the amount of drops they had.
Weird.
Still works better than Tom.
And yeah, so we ended at 4 rounds, went 3-1. And then on Saturday, I decided to play a different deck. I went 2-2, losing my first 2 rounds. I piloted Arctina Umbreon. Round 1. Got donked by an Arceus V-Star. Started a lone Umbreon. He got his turn 2 Arceus, DTE Choice Belt, all that shenanigans. And then my round 2, I started Alakazam like Eric did against Casey. I played against the Birds, the United Wings deck, and he started Murkrow.
Get birded.
Shout out to Brad. Brad got the donk
Cock.
there. And ended the event winning my last 2, beating what else did I play? Ting Lu and DJ's Lost Box deck. So it wasn't too good for performance there. Ended up getting 9th, knowing I should not play Arceus Tina again. And then on Sunday, I went back to my comfortable deck, lost Tina, ended up going 5-0, winning the event. Felt really good about the deck. Changed up a few things. Took out my cross-switcher Tina variant, just went with a heavy boss count and more switches, which felt really good. And piloted against some pretty good decks. Played against a Guardy deck, which was pretty close. My opponent made a misplay and not collapsing his Gardevoir EX. And then I had the Tina boss. I got Roxanne into boss switch. Top decking energy.
Ugh. Disgusting.
Roxanne is a myth, ladies and gentlemen. And then my 5th round, I played against Arctina deck, playing Lost City. And my strategy with that was just to kill the Tina as fast as possible. Because I feel like in that matchup, if the opposing person gets the first Tina knockout, then it's just kind of hard for you to come back. So I capitalized, killed his Tina, 2 Cram Spit Innocently cards, Spit Innocently hits, and then it was just over from there. He couldn't get his Tina out. Arceus, Trinity Nova, 5 energies onto his Tina V, which got knocked out. And that was pretty much the deciding factor of that game.
So what place did you get that one?
That one was at the Kraken Games. I got 1st place. Going 5-0.
First place pretty good.
First place. Been getting 2nd too many times. Which puts me at 85 points.
Dang.
Nice.
You're almost a 5th of the way there.
That's hype.
You're like what top? We did the math on this. You're like, because you're missing points still, yeah.
Yeah, I'm missing points from a cup. One of the event ladies got my name wrong on it, my last name. So she's figuring that out. She told me she's gonna fix it.
Nice, because that would put you in top 100 right now in terms of points in the U.S.
Yeah,
which is pretty good.
It's pretty poggers.
Right, especially in a position where like we're on the side of the country where we haven't had as many opportunities for cups.
Yeah, Pacific Northwest is a very difficult place to grind exclusively out of.
Right. So, hopefully this weekend, Dyson, you had 100 more points to that.
that's the goal. Tina Lost Box. It won't let me down.
Until it does.
I almost wonder if that's the play. If I need to go to that deck.
Your Lost Tina. I've been thinking about it too, but
I think you might.
man, I have been grinding with Guardy, learning nothing but can't stop playing it.
Oh, Eric, or Casey, I got a pitch for you.
Yeah.
What about the Soul Rock Lunatone path?
Oh, where you do like you can do the lock, but then you play out the Lunatone that makes your Pokemon unaffected?
Yeah, by the path.
So I have a counter proposal. So you go one Pawniard, and then you go one Bisharp,
Mhm.
and then you go one King Gambit, and then you go one Rare Candy, and then
In
you go one
Guardy?
Thornton. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Because if you ever fall behind, you just reversal onto it, and it knocks out Mewtwo VMAX or Mew VMAX.
Would you
Or
up
it's
your
Steel too, so I think it also knocks out. Oh no, it's Dark. It's Dark. I'm just saying.
would you up your reversal count?
Yeah, I'd probably go to 2.
But I
I'm
thought
also
the
considering a Golurk. I kind of like the idea of Golurk for Charizard, because what are they going to do about it?
because it goes back to the hand, right?
Yep.
I don't know.
And then you just kill the Charmander.
They might have a comeback play where they can pitch you out for the rare candy, get another 3 energies.
I mean, if they have another Charmander, whatever. But I think the idea is like you just use it to keep them having to have it, because it means they're also not searching up bosses. They're not searching up Ionos. If they're just going for rare candy, then they still need a way to establish that and then swing back. But then I only took 1 prize. So the idea is I can repeatedly do that, or I can even just boss up the Pidgeot, kill that, and then I don't know. It's just something I want to tinker with.
No, that's actually really smart because in a lot of the form, like you won't even have to invest the King Gavin line in that. At that
Mm-hmm.
point, you're just using, you know, right? In hindsight, why don't you just load 9 energies onto a Zacian? But that's what, only 3 energies to
I
attack?
believe the Golurk is 4, but
Yeah,
it's
which
you
is
can
a
do it
lot.
faster though. Like getting 4 down is much easier than getting 8 down, or 9 or whatever it's going to end up being.
I think it might be 10.
Right.
Well, because I think it's 310 for the Charizard EX.
330.
So 330 means it's
Zosh.
8, right? Because 60 and then
9,
9.
it's 9. 270 plus 60 is 330. Yeah. Which is kind of hard to do.
That's
unless
hoping
you...
that you only that you've prized less than 2 energy. Which sometimes I find myself only having 8 or 9 available. But it means everything has to get out of the deck. But Golurk is also...
No, yeah. It doesn't work on live yet, though.
I actually haven't checked.
Oh, because it's still bugged, probably, isn't
I
it?
think it might still be bugged.
Well, that's a fantastic answer, right? I mean, super rods and nest balls to go find it again, and you just...
Yeah, you like never want to bench it, or if you do, you like collapse Stadium it away as soon as possible. I think it seems spicy.
Well, this kind of leads us into, well, not really as much as I thought it would, but speaking of these challenges you've been visiting, it's time for DJ's Shop Review Corner featuring DJ.
Yes, favorite part of the segment. Now, I will say that I did not...
Oh, yeah, because you traveled... Did you travel to the one on Sunday?
I did not travel to the one on Sunday.
Gotcha.
Yeah. This weekend, I was not the designated driver, so I was in Bend all weekend. But we do have someone who did, right? So, Dyson, how was your experience Friday? Oregon City. What was the name of the shop?
It was called Geek and Games.
Geek and Games.
Geek and Games. Yeah. That shop. It was an interesting shop. They had a wooden themed wooden chairs, wooden table, old school.
That's kind of wild.
Pokemon side with like a big old shelf dividing between Pokemon, and they had a half of the room with like D&D and like board games. It was pretty interesting, I'd say. The people, they were cool. They weren't the most helpful. I had to write my deck list on a sticky note.
What?
They didn't have any
Huh?
deck lists.
Oh.
That's funny.
Yeah. So I'd explain to the head judge, yeah, this is set. Pokemon. This is what they gave me. So everyone else brought in a printed deck list.
I thought you wrote them out yesterday or on Saturday.
It was Friday.
Oh, that was the Friday event.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. But yeah, I'd give that store probably like a 3.5 out of 10. It was
Out
their
of 10?
or not out of 5. 5.
Oh, okay. I was about to say, sheesh.
Did not like them.
My bad. But yeah, they were cool. It was their first league challenge. They opened up around the COVID era.
Okay.
So they're relatively new. And that was their first challenge they ran. And yeah, that was the Geekin Games review.
And then what was the other store? Was that Kraken?
That was Kraken Cards. We talked about them a bit. They were cool people. So I like the layout of that store. Great judge. Yeah, I give that store 4.5, 4 out of 5.
4.5 out of 10.
Got some high standards over
Yeah,
here.
because Sunday you guys did have a couple options of locations to go to, and it does sound like the traveling team really had a good impression of Kraken.
Yeah, the Kraken people are pretty good. And then we got Saturday, our local event, E4 Games. Shout out to E4 Games.
Always great.
E4 Cards and More, your premier card game store for Bend, Central Oregon location. Off Highway 97.
Next to a Whole Foods. Behind a jewelry
Nature's
store.
Grocers. And it's in the mall. Yes, there's a mall. Technically speaking, a mall. All right. And then our last topic wanted to go over was data collection or collecting data, however you want to say it, where we wanted to go over a bit on what we do when we want to either find a deck list, maybe look at some results. Thankfully, a lot of this is kind of condensed into just a couple places that make it really easy, and then kind of using those deck lists and tournaments in our own testing to try to get an idea of what we're looking for with testing. So, for instance, it's kind of unanimous at this point. Like the site to go for if you're looking for deck lists and results is Limitless TCG. They kind of are like the premier place for Pokemon information. You'd be hard pressed to find better places. A lot of the times those deck lists end up coming from Twitter, and then they just kind of get compiled to the Limitless site. There's 2 places on Limitless to get the information, either in-person events or they have the online section. And the online one's good if you're doing a lot of leagues and challenges, because that's all best of 1. So it's going to give you a better idea of what best of 1 looks like, whereas looking at the actual paper results, those historically are all best of 3. So you do have to know a little bit of what you're looking for going into it. But most of the time, like we said last episode, a lot of the best of 1 versus best of 3 decks, the differences you're looking for, you should kind of see it as you're looking at those two sites. And as well as, there's one other place I've been recently using. It's called Pokebook, but spelled a little bit different. It's Pokeca book.com. And they actually compile a lot of Japanese deck lists. And this is good if we're looking forward, especially right now, where we're kind of in between set releases, where Japan has 151, but we don't. But that set's not super impactful. So a lot of the times their results and everything tend to look closer to ours with Obsidian Flames. And so looking at these results, it gives you a really good idea of what to kind of expect. And that has been pretty useful. Looking at the Charizard's extremely popular over there, and there's a lot of lists for it. But man, I'm not sure if I'm 100% sold on Charizard. But that leads us into talking more about this data collection. Where does anyone have any good tips on when you are testing what you might be looking for?
Something I want to note back onto with the site like Limitless, it not only compiles deck lists for you, it also can show you matchup spread information. It can show you like what decks usually have decent matchups into other decks. You can see what it loses to a lot, what it wins to, and I believe there's a data matrix you can find where it'll show you like a chart of like here's a bunch of popular decks lined up, and then their overall win rates against each other, which is useful if you feel like a specific deck is going to pop up in a meta. You can be like, oh, I think a lot of people are going to start playing Arcdura or Lost Tina, so I'm going to find whatever it has the worst matchup into, and I'm going to play that.
True. It's a good way to kind of counter the meta.
Well, yeah, and I mean, not even only that. Like, it lets you go, really deep. Like, you can see the matchup spreads of what you think the meta is going to be, like the top, two or three decks, and opposed to choosing something like Rapid Strike Urshifu, which has like an insane win percentage into Lost Box. Um, you could look at something like Arceus Duraludon Umbreon, which has a good matchup into Lost Box, and Gardevoir, the second best deck, and whatever the third is, either it being Mew, which is one worlds, or um, whatever that another Arceus version, typically the third best deck. But compiling data that way allows you to select a deck that has a pretty much really good matchup in the overall field, and then you can focus on its weaknesses. So either techs if you're playing in 2 out of 3, or um, making it as consistent as possible for your best of one. So that was a good point, Casey. Yeah, that matchup is key. That's pretty much what I look at when I look at Limitless.
And what that does is it lets you lead into the playtesting results to try to see how can you back up those numbers with play patterns and play information. So what Eric was saying, like going into play testing, what are you looking for when you're doing your games? Like in a lot of games me and Trenton play, he's generally playing Lost Box, I'm playing Gardevoir, and I've been having a rough time into Lost Box. So when we're playing, what I'm evaluating is, okay, what if I start with 2 routes and I could get a Manaphy down? Is that good enough? Okay, well, what if I do, 3 routes and maybe I don't have Manaphy and it's a prize? How does that route look like? And trying to identify what the different possible starting permutations are and then how they play out for the rest of the game. Now, obviously, there's sometimes variants where he Mirage Gates on his first turn and then like Dragonite punches everything, or Greninja snipes a bunch of stuff because Manaphy was prized. But I think just playing games, especially in the context of playtesting, isn't quite enough. I think you really should be trying to look for what boards to set up, what Pokemon to try to get into play, what things to try to charge up. And what I mean by this is like, do you need Manaphy on one of this matchup? Can you put out Greninja on one of this matchup? How many of your basic Pokemon that need to evolve can you put out into this matchup in order for them to be around for your next turn? Or if you need to charge something up, like how do I focus on, for Arceus, you always need to do 1 energy attach and then a double turbo or your evolution in order to start doing your actual attacks to charge up. Well, what does that look like? How can I find those cards? When do I use my Iono to try to find the energy? Information like that is really what you're trying to gather when you're playing these games outside of events, because otherwise you're just kind of playing for fun, which is fine, but you could be reinforcing bad habits or not learning what cards to put into play or treating every matchup the same, which is a problem because you really don't want to treat every matchup the same. Some of them might act the same, but you really should be thinking about different things to look for when playing. Like with Gardevoir, one of the lines is, in most matchups, like even in the Gardevoir mirror, you don't want to put down your Zacian. You never want to present a second prize outside of your Gardevoir EX, which is already pretty difficult to one-shot. So it's knowing which matchups you're able to put the Zacian down, or which ones you're supposed to just focus out your Cresselia, or just focus into a Gardevoir, the basic Gardevoir, which matchups you want to have the reversal energy for, or which ones you can get rid of it, and other pieces of information like that. Has anyone else have any thoughts on like which, like what they try to look for when doing their playtesting like that?
Well, when I look for playtesting, like I look for the reasons why certain, high caliber players added a certain card, right? Like in Gardevoir, for example, like why is Memory Skip Rolls an automatic include in every version of Gardevoir? And it makes a big differences in some matchups in form. It's like putting your opponent in a position to not have a retreat option or burn resources to retreat out to continue their pressure. So, like, in that sense, that makes sense. Or, one card that we've debated specifically in Gardevoir is there's a Corellia that is from, I think, Silver Tempest that has Mirage Step, or is that Astral Radiance? Uh,
I think it's
yeah,
Tempest.
I think it is
where
Tempest.
it's able to directly put your three Corellia in play so that your following turn you are best set up to not have to use Rare Candy, which, in the Lost Box matchup, maybe that's a line that you look to set up where you got your two Ralts and your Mana Fee because if your Ralts gets knocked out, you can Mirage Step and still get into the game. So, those are the things that I look for is why certain cards that are not in every list that a high caliber player plays, and take that into other types of archetypes, right? So like another one that was like that was it Mawile that
Oh,
folks were using to like lock Pokemon in play, right?
yep.
Yeah. So maybe
They would wait for you to use up most of your energy or retreats, and then just bring something out, make sure they had more cards in deck, and then lock you into place.
That's kind of also with that similar kind of effect why Umbreon became such a big staple in the Arceus decks, was because people found not only is it a good like way to boss something up and kind of effectively play two supporters in a turn, but then also that mean look on the V is incredibly powerful when you can get it to the right board state, where sometimes you just win the game on the spot due to deck out.
right. And Eric, you found that line, right? In your playtesting, finding different scenarios to win.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I actually pulled it off a couple times against people at these league events, and it's always a hoot when it's like, oh, this is how this is gonna go, and you see that opportunistic. Oh, I can just boss that up and keep it there forever. But it also leads into another trap with playtesting where you can kind of get yourself into some bad habits of you're always fishing for that line, or you're always fishing for one specific play that's like, oh, this one's the matchup if I do this. But if your opponent knows how to beat that, then you've kind of put yourself in a much worse situation going forward. Like there were some times where I would kind of tunnel vision into, oh, I can just do this with Umbreon. I just lock them up, and then they have a switch, right? Because I didn't really, appreciate that they might have a switching card or some way to get out of the lock. I'm like, oh, I've got the lock, do it now, without better understanding if it's a good position to do it.
Resource management.
Exactly.
Yeah, I got a bad habit is when I get like a couple Pokemon search cards, like a couple Battle VIP passes, nest balls. I sort of tend to bench lock myself,
Mm.
and that could that could bite you in the butt later on in the game. For example, whenever I play with Trenton, I know not to bench lock myself because he's playing that Lost Box deck, and generally he can get to 10 and start activating that Sableye faster than I can if I'm playing Lost Tino. So with that Sableye combo, you can just add up a bunch of damage slowly and just take those knockouts for 3 or 4 prizes in one turn, which just puts me down.
Right, and with that, I'm pretty sure all three of you guys do this. Like, how often are you asking your opponent to check their discard?
Probably once. I don't do it that often early game, but once it gets to probably mid to late game, 3-4 turns in, I'm usually every other turn or so be like, hey, can I check out your discard? Hey, can I check this out?
Right, and the reason why you do that?
It's generally to check what their outs could be for certain situations. It's how many bosses do this list usually run? How many are in the discard? So to know how many they've used. What's the resources left? How many super rods have they used? How much energy do they have left? Do they have any Ionos left? It's trying to identify the pieces that could prevent me from winning that they may have already used or gotten rid of in Ultra Balls or research or any kind of pieces like that.
Right, and then in a closed deck list tournament, right? Most tournaments are closed deck lists in person. How are you knowing this information?
Generally, from doing research of either having played the decks, watching YouTube videos, or going through Limitless of the deck lists that will likely be popular, which will then give you a rough idea on general ratios. Limitless itself also gives you if you like look at an archetype or a deck, it'll give you like percentages or rough number averages of how many cards per deck are ran in these different types of decks. So for like Gardevoir, they usually have 2 bosses, they usually have 2 Gardevoir EX, they usually have 2 basic Gardevoir, they usually have 1 Zacian. And so you can kind of identify the commonalities of what cards they could have to then let you make informed decisions on what you're looking for and what could stop you.
Right, bingo. Right, that's doing your homework, and why we discuss this stuff of getting information before a tournament and using those to your advantage. Right, it's not deck lists aren't public knowledge, but with the community average of what deck lists are most consistent, because most of the time deck lists are copy and paste. Someone finds a deck list, test it, copy paste, and maybe they add a couple different cards that you have to look out for and account for, but doing your homework prior to tournament and doing the proper testing and learning these deck lists, you put yourself in a much better position to be successful. Right, like with my 3 co-hosts here, they all have won a challenge. They all done well at the cup that they've attended. So these are things that I know they do to improve their game.
How many times have y'all done open hand playtesting? Or do you know what that is?
I don't think I do the open hand playtesting.
No, I say we do it sometimes, Dice, when we test. When we're in a position where it's a tough call and we ask each other, like, what do you think the best line is? We won't start the game out open hand playtesting, but I could see the benefit of it.
And for those who may not be aware, open hand playtesting is a playtesting pattern in which you either at the start of the game or at some point you just show each other the cards in your hand and what you have access to. So both players know fully what's possible, what you have, or what you could be doing. And from that, the goal is to know, like, if I see this similar situation again, I know the opponent may not have all the same cards in their hand, but we can kind of map out the lines that each player could take. And then from there, we can be like, okay, if you do this and this, or if I do this and this, what is your response? Or if you do that and that, and I have this set up, what is my response? And you do almost like, I don't know, like open hand testing, or like chess, where you can just see all the moves ahead and be like, cool. In this situation, this line is statistically better because it prevents you from doing this, this, and this. Or sometimes I want to do this line because if you don't have this but did have this, I could lose. And that's where like looking at their discard or memorizing deck lists could also help, so you can recognize when those patterns could come up to then know like, oh, I did this testing, they have these in this discard, I can go this route, a Mawile lock, and I could win.
It can be a little tricky because it can also enforce some bad habits at times. So something you have to be kind of aware of. If it's like, if you have perfect knowledge, it's really easy for you to go, okay, I know how to beat this. It's done, and not consider, but I wouldn't know this all the time, right? Just thinking, oh, I know what this answer is. I'm just going to do that answer because I know what my opponent has. So it's like, it's good to know, but it can lead you down some like some bad play patterns.
No, that's a good insight. I mean, that also unlocks in your testing, you played the most ideal game. And if you're tracking your win percentages, and you're respecting your opponent, you're like, if my opponent plays perfectly, I win this game, 54 times out of 100, which, in a 2 out of 3 format, I would take those odds. In a perfect scenario, obviously there's luck in prize cards and drawing cards, but if both players are playing optimally, then you really know what your deck can do, which,
right.
And then you might run into those games where your opponent misplays and, you played perfectly, they misplayed, and you win that game. So that I can see the power of open hand testing.
Now, what about gold fishing? Does anyone here do gold fishing?
I don't know what that is.
So gold fishing is you take your deck, you shuffle it, draw 7 cards, set 6 prizes aside, and just play it out. Just pretend you don't have an opponent and just see what that hand can do. How much energy can you get to? What Pokemon can you have? Test it going first, going second. It is just playing on your own and seeing what your opening hand plus a turn or two can be 5 or 6 times in a row.
I definitely do that.
Yeah, goldfish is just kind of the term for it in terms of like, it's kind of some
term I
old
learned.
gamer terms.
So that one's particularly useful if you're in a hotel room waiting for the night of, you're unsure of some ratios. You can just kind of shuffle up, draw 7, and see how it plays out, and just keep repeating and kind of get a feel for what any kind of tweaks could do.
I usually do the goldfishing tactic like right after I build like a deck.
That's what a lot of people tend to do.
It's good because it also gives you an idea of like, if I'm looking to open these specific cards, let's say, for instance, as a random pull, a Arceus and an energy. I want to get that every time. Then I have to kind of build my deck to enable me to do that. So by goldfishing, it's going to let me see how many times, because especially in Arceus, it's really important what you see turn 1. Like, it's really important what you see turn 1. So being able to actually just do a quick test hand to see what your ratios look like in terms of how much energy versus how much card selection versus possible card draw that's not a supporter versus getting the Pokemon themselves, build how that builds out in your current deck list.
Something that's also is kind of replicating is, I don't know if anyone here has heard of a hypogeometric calculator.
What?
So it is a type of, I don't remember if it's calculus or, let me look.
Some kind of big math that's got letters in it.
So this is a popular tool for Magic. It's a calculator you can use to compute individual and cumulative hypergeometric possibilities. So in layman terms, it lets you know if I'm running X amount of cards in a deck, how many times could I expect to see some of those cards in my opening hand or in X number of draws. So this is kind of the nerd version of the goldfishing, where you just enter in like a deck size, how many cards you're trying to see, how many cards you're going to see at once. So for example, like if I'm running an Arceus deck and I need to see Arceus, and I have a 60 card deck, I'll put in 60 cards. I have 4 cards I'm looking for, and I'm going to be drawing 7 cards at the start of the turn, and I only want to see 1. You'd plug all that into this calculator, and it would tell you the percentage odds of seeing those cards over like a curve of time. And so it gives you a rough estimate of, if I want to tech in this 1 card or these 4 cards or something, what are the odds I'm going to see them, and how often do I think I can see them? For Pokemon, it's not quite as useful just because we have lots of search options for Pokemon, and we draw so many cards compared to most card games. But it's a pretty useful tool for identifying like how many energies do I think I need. If I want to run tech pieces, how many do I think I should run to see it in a certain number of percentage of matchups? It's a pretty useful tool used a lot in games like Magic, where you have resources in your deck that you have to play in order to play other cards, which kind of applies for Pokemon with energy, but less so because, again, we see so many extra cards compared to most games. But it's a really useful tool for just probability on what you could see in a game at once.
Right. You can also use that tool to not only include your 4 RCSs, but you can incorporate like Nest Ball, VIP Pass, and Pokemon search cards in the formula to see how likely you are to have an Arceus on your play. Your turn.
Yeah, you could plug in like your Nest Balls, your Ultra Balls, your Arceus,
right,
and just see like what are my odds of actually hitting it.
Right, and that's a smart. Well, yeah, you could tweak your numbers to get the highest percentage chance without sacrificing, the highest percentage with I guess the least amount of cards, because you also want other cards for other functions, right? So.
And so this probably leans more into deck theory than actual playtesting theory, but it does correlate with goldfishing because it's kind of what you're doing when you do a goldfish, just physically.
Wow, I think that... What's that calculator called?
It is a hypergeometric distribution probability calculator. Or you could usually just look up a hypergeometric calculator.
I think that'll definitely make my game better. Let's try that tool.
Yeah, so that was some insight on what we look for, kind of what we think about when we are testing, trying to get the best results as we can when not actually playing the game or playing at a tournament. And that brings us to the end of our podcast. I want to thank everybody for listening. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe on whatever platform you're on, and have a good one.
Bye.
Later.